Well, it's D-Day for the folks in Ottawa for the Freedom Convoy. The invasion of their protest area by I guess it's OPP, Ontario Provincial Police, and Ottawa Police does not appear to be like federal military folks. It doesn't seem to be the RCMP from what I've seen. It seems to be provincial and local cops. Also, I'm seeing they're being aided by cops from the surrounding area. They've established checkpoints, a la Cold War Berlin, throughout the city. They're stopping people, asking them what their business is, and I saw at least one case in which some folks who I guess were determined by the police to be heading towards the Freedom Convoy protests, they had their windows smashed, and I guess they were carrying first aid or something like that. But you've got a huge, massive presence of police now at the site. They have, according to them, arrested 70 people so far. That number is going to continue to rise. Every one of those 70 people, of course, are going to have their assets seized. Whatever assets they have with them, trucks, cars, children, animals, and, of course, their bank accounts, and any financial assets like, a brokerage account, that's going to be seized, i.e. your retirement. If you have a retirement account, I don't know if they call it an IRA in Canada, but your equivalent up there, an IRA or a 401k, the Canadian equivalent, that, from what I understand of the order, is also going to be seized. Now, I think the good news is these folks I don't think they're going to be charged with trespassing because they're on a public street. I think they're going to be charged with, mischief seems to be the charge that they're going for, which, should be just a ticket. They're going to hold these folks for, as long as possible, but I don't think they'll be able to do what they did to the January 6th folks, in which they've just been holding folks in solitary confinement without bail and then keep delaying their trials. That's how they're keeping the January 6th people in prison. Now, I guess I shouldn't put anything past them, since Canada has already gotten so much worse than the U.S. Looking at what they've been doing to the January 6th folks here, I guess it's definitely possible that these folks in Ottawa from the Freedom Convoy are treated even worse. Now, interestingly, we are seeing a very militarized response from the police, even though these are not military people in name. They are kind of military or militaristic in practice. This is certainly a good example of the militarized police. They all, certainly seem to be in body armor. They've got ARs strapped to their chest. I think that Canada manufactures its own ARs. I don't think they're Colts. If I remember correctly, Canada might manufacture their own. Can't remember what Canadian AR variants are called. But either way, you got these riot cops with rifles strapped to their chest, rounding up totally unarmed, peaceful protesters who are merely blocking a street, and they're not even blocking like what BLM did. BLM would go and try and shut down the interstate. These folks have shut down the street in front of Parliament, which here in the United States, the street in front of the White House and the street in front of the U.S. Capitol, I think, might even be blocked off all the time, and people just protest nonstop. So I think it's safe to say we've reached the end game. I don't know what things will look like after today. The media have been barred from the area. The Canadian authorities do not want anyone recording what's going on. So much kudos to the brave folks from Rebel News and from Viva Fry. Viva's not currently streaming anymore, but Rebel still is. They are there embedded with the protesters, and people are they keep getting picked off. They're rounded up, and they've got a line of folks right up against the police, and the police, I guess, are just picking off people slowly and getting them out of the crowd and taking them and bringing them into custody. And I have to say, it's quite something to see these people who are willing to stand there and wait until they get arrested, because that's all they're doing. you know that it's over at this point. There's, they've made the decision. They've got their emergency order, their War Powers Act, and they're coming for you. You can try and run at this point. And they've been handing out flyers to that effect over the last couple days, saying, "Hey, get out now, or else we're going to wreck you." But at this point, being arrested and getting thrown in jail for a couple weeks, that's pretty minor compared to what else they're going to do to you anyway. If you're there, your life has already been destroyed. It doesn't matter whether they arrest you or not. You've lost all your assets. So you don't have a whole lot left to lose. So I guess at this point, why not just, stick it out and take whatever left they have to dish out. Parliament was supposed to meet today, and I guess if that were to have gone forward, members of Parliament would have had a chance to challenge this emergency order, and perhaps they could have brought it to a vote. It's unclear whether or not Trudeau would have won that vote, but since they decided to adjourn for the day and not meet because of the ongoing police action, it's kind of ironic. Oh, we can't debate the emergency order because the emergency order is in effect right now. It's kind of a great circular logic there. So meaning, they can't do anything about the emergency order. Sure, maybe they'll meet about it next week after these folks have been scraped up off the pavement and it's all over anyway. And then, the Conservatives can make a big show of voting against it and rescinding the emergency order and say, yay, we saved the day after everything's already been ruined. Or maybe the Parliament will vote to keep this and say, no, we need this emergency order in place in case anyone else tries to protest against the government ever again. Maybe old Justin Trudeau will use this opportunity to round up not only these folks in Ottawa and the folks who financially supported them on Give, Send, Go and Gofundme, but perhaps he will go after his political opponents just in the way that his father Pierre Trudeau did back during, I believe they called it the October Crisis of 1970. Either way, you should expect to see more of this in the future, not less, because Trudeau is supported by this in this action by all of the Western governments. The only folks who I've seen condemning him are from China or Iran, in the case of like Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, the old Iranian president, and India. I've seen the Indian ambassador to Canada condemn this because, of course, Canada was very critical of India's handling of their farmers' protests, which was last year or the year before, when Modi decided to end the Farm Bill and stop heavily subsidizing inefficient farming practices. This isn't going to end today. It's not going to end in Canada. This is the new normal. We will see this because it's not going to end with Wu flu mandates and vaccine mandates. That's just the beginning. What we're going to see in the future is the climate change agenda. And I'm not some great oracle for pointing this out. Lots of people have been pointing this out from the beginning, that the Wu flu stuff is a dry run for how they're going to handle climate change going into the future. And, something that I used to say that I no longer say, unfortunately, and I wish I could still believe it, was that all of this climate change nonsense would never be implemented because it's so thoroughly anti-human by nature that people would revolt. They would never tolerate, losing the internal combustion engine because the scarcity. The reason why every car on the road is not an electric car is economics. If the economics made sense, every car on the road would be electric already. You wouldn't have to force people to do it. The fact that almost every car on the road is powered by an internal combustion engine is proof that if you got rid of the internal combustion engine, there would just be a lot less cars on the road. The fact that almost all of our energy is not so-called green energy is evidence that if you got rid of the non-green energies, we just have a lot less energy. Believe it or not, these resources are much more scarce. these so-called green technologies in which we mine in the earth for rare minerals and destroy whatever area is being mined. Mining for rare earth minerals, not great for the environment. The real environment. People want to talk, the climate, we're affecting the climate. There's going to be a 4-degree difference in 100 years. And in order to, abate that, we're going to have to destroy the environment all around the world, mining for these extremely scarce minerals needed to, make all of this, all these, solar panels and batteries and whatnot. I'm getting off on a tangent, but my point is, the green stuff doesn't work. It's not sustainable. It's not recyclable. It's not going to work. Just like the Wu flu restrictions, the vaccine mandates, the mask mandates, none of that works. And people don't want to do it. And it's going to make people's quality of life significantly lower. And when you do that, people are going to rebel, like we're seeing in Canada. And so it's important for leaders across the West that somebody sets the precedent that it's okay to do what Justin Trudeau is doing right now, because they know they're going to have to do it themselves at some point to their own people. When the entire state narrative is nothing but a web of lies, you have to outlaw truth. You can't allow people to speak unapproved truths because it will shatter the state's narrative. Heck, look at the Yellow Vests. What were the Yellow Vests protesting? They were protesting high diesel fuel prices. That's how it started. Then it turned into, hey, let's get rid of Trudeau or Macron overall. And then Macron brutally beat them down, and he ended that movement. We're going to see more things like that. I mean, the trucker protest is very, very analogous to the Yellow Vests. It's the same people protesting in a different country for very similar reasons. Canada right now is a proving ground. It's a test site. It's like a big trial balloon. They're taking one of the most obedient people on Earth and seeing how far they can push them before things totally break down. Trudeau is being as combative, as intransigent and aggressive and antagonistic as possible towards dissidents. And at this point, I think the way they think about it is that if Trudeau can get away with this much, then we can too. So they want to see how far it goes. I don't think that it was ever an option for Trudeau to try and negotiate with these people, not that he would want to. He does not see them as people, as his equals, certainly. So we'll have to see what happens to him after this. And I don't know who runs good polls up in Canada. I don't know if there's anybody who runs good polls, but I've seen very concerning numbers. Of course, you would expect the media to push poll numbers that benefit their own cause. Upwards of 2/3 of Canadians support a violent government crackdown on these people. I've seen that number floating around. I don't know how accurate it is, but I would not be shocked, given Canada's general political makeup, if a majority of the people supported what is going on. And that should be concerning. Because if that's the case, then I don't think that Trudeau is going to suffer much politically from this. Now, I don't know. I don't know Canadian politics. I'm not saying that's for certain, but I'm saying if any of these polls are correct, if people really aren't that upset at him, if his voters haven't turned on him over this, which I wouldn't be shocked if they didn't. I think about, Democratic voters here in the United States. It's not that they were people, back when, Bush or Trump or whoever's president, they always call them fascists. It's not that they're really concerned about a president, infringing upon civil liberties and creating a police state or something like that. It's that they just don't like the other party, obviously. In Trump's cases, where it was the most comical calling Trump a fascist. And so, even though I don't know Canadian politics that well, Canada is pretty darn close to the United States, and I would imagine that their libs up there are about as deranged as ours, if not more. And then, of course, you have the problem of there being no real opposition party in Canada. fact that the Conservatives support this, even though I guess they feel like it's in their best political interest at this point to sound somewhat pro-trucker. Jason, as Ezra Levant likes to point out constantly, Jason Kenney, the Premier of Alberta, the most conservative province in Canada, still is holding a Christian pastor in jail without bond for the crime of preaching the gospel. So there are no conservatives in power in Canada. There are no conservative politicians who can balance Trudeau in this sense. The thing that conservative politicians are upset about is the fact that Trudeau lumped them in with Nazis personally. They're personally offended for themselves. They're not really concerned about what's happening to individual citizens because they also do these things that Trudeau is doing. They also lock up innocent civilians who are just trying to live their lives. Now, here's I guess the bright side of that, though. The fact that they're being so aggressive. You have the I guess the positive accelerationist case, in which people are so rapidly thrown out of polite society that they reach a critical mass to where they really can just function as their own society because enough of them have been ostracized from, as I said, polite society, liberal society. You don't need a majority then. You don't need to win elections. You can just function as your own group, have your own underground black markets, which is how you'll have to function because you won't have access to financial services. And, you know, people talk about Western secession in Canada. I mean, with it got, Alberta would be the prime candidate for that, but look at who you've got leading Alberta. I don't see anybody coming up, again, I'm not an expert on Canadian politics, but I don't see anybody who's like some strong secessionist leader in Alberta. Certainly they don't have a movement like they do in Quebec, and in Quebec right now, you know, yes, the Bloc Québécois is opposed to the emergency order, but they were, you know, other than that, they were worse than Trudeau throughout the whole last 2 years. They're just opposed to federal power in principle, which is not worthless. I mean, I would prefer people who are opposed to federal power in principle versus people who are in favor of federal powers. But it's not like Quebec is going to secede and be some great free country if that were to ever happen. Quebec would not secede because of what's going on right now. But if this were happening in the United States, if they were pushing this hard in America, what they're doing right now in Canada, that certainly would be on the table. You could definitely see, I think, American states break away because of what's going on. If what's going on in Canada were to happen here, where people were being denied financial services, where their bank accounts were being seized, because there's just too many people on that side here in America. I mean, where I live, which is not the reddest of states by any means, Florida, our government is opening an investigation into Gofundme for what they did to these people in trying to give their money away to leftist charities and divert it away from the truckers. Back when, I mean, that was a story that was only lasted a couple of days. There's been a lot that's happened since then. But my point is, when you see stuff like that, and that's going on in Canada, and where I live, my government is that interested in it. If that were happening in the United States, you can guarantee that even if they wouldn't file articles of secession or whatever like they did in the 1860s, you would see states like mine separate themselves from the central powers and from the Davos party. And by the Davos party, I don't mean the Democratic Party. The Davos folks span both parties, that in all countries. So who knows? Maybe as an American, I should see the brighter side of this, and that if this does come to my country, it will push us in a positive direction. It'll break this stalemate that we've been living in for quite a few years here, where it's clear that there is no real reconciliation in terms of legislative matters, living under the same laws, even having the same culture, of course, is way out the window. There was Tim Pool had a lib on, which I want to go back and watch the rest of the episode, but he wrote a book about a civil war. He's actually a Canadian guy, and he seems kind of like a blue-pilled lefty type of guy. I didn't watch the whole thing yet, as I said, but he summed things up pretty well. And he said, when you're looking at, is a country going to split up, or his words were civil war. I don't like that term. I would not. I don't think it's accurate in this context, in the context of the United States. But he said, when you're looking at, if a country is going to have these kinds of divisions to lead to a civil war or breaking up or whatever, you have to ask the people there, would they rather be married or would they rather be right? It's a classic, human relationship question. Are you going to give in because you want to stay married and you want to, have happy relations with someone, or would you rather, be right because you know that you're correct on this matter and you're not going to give in? And people in the United States would rather be right. And maybe Canadians are getting to that point as well. But definitely we're here in the United States. I've said for quite a while, all we need really is a catalyst to set things off here. I've said in the past, the perfect one would be like gun control. If you had Democrats on the federal government try and do like gun confiscation or ban, ARs or semi-autos or something of that nature, that would be a catalyst for splitting this country apart. Canada, unfortunately, even though the contingent of people who are on the other side, who are against the regime, are, I think, more passionate and more dedicated than the folks in this country even. I think that's completely indisputable at this point when you look at what they've been willing to do the last couple of weeks in standing up to their government. They're much more dedicated to that than the American right is as of this moment. But despite that intensity, I think that their numbers are too few, even in their own strongholds, their supposed strongholds, like Alberta or Saskatchewan, which is also a conservative province. The numbers of people who feel this passionate are just too small, and they're not going to be able to make a difference. If they really could concentrate in one place, if let's say every province was ruled by the Liberal Party or some other leftist party, and you only had one province that was conservative, and a majority of the conservatives in that province felt this way, or the vast majority, I should say, let's say 75%, 80%, were in line with this movement, then I think things could go somewhere. But as of now, it looks like these folks are going to get martyred. Not martyred in terms of be killed. I don't think that people are going to be killed. But I think they're going to be ruined. They're not going to kill them. They're just going to make them wish they were dead. Take away your kids, take away your dog, take away your livelihood, take away all of your property, ruin you, and then let you off yourself. And then once they get away with it there, you're going to start to see these tactics rolled out aggressively in other Western countries. And if it comes to the United States, I don't want to say I'm 100% confident, but I'm more confident that will be a bridge too far. Not because the people in Canada aren't passionate enough. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that the numbers of passionate people are insufficient, and I think it would be greater here. I think that people on the American right are much more mentally prepared for this than people on the Canadian right were necessarily. Canadians are, forgive me if this is generalizing too much, I think that they're brand new to questioning the regime as a concept. It's no doubt they're getting pushed to a breaking point, but I think that most of them never considered that there was such a thing as a breaking point. They took the wisdom of the state for granted for the entirety of their existence. Remember, Canada never seceded from the empire. They were granted self-governance by London. They didn't fight for it. That's not a part of their national myth. They don't have a spirit of rebellion. They have a spirit of compliance. That's why it's so remarkable that you're seeing so many people getting pushed to this point in a nation like Canada. It's much less remarkable to see Americans acting in that way, acting defiant. It's natural. It's what you should expect, even though it doesn't always happen. And it's kind of pathetic, the lengths to which, the people of New York City, for example, a very defiant and aggressive culture, what they have been willing to endure. So, I think I've gone on long enough. I will think about this more. I will see if anything significant has changed by tomorrow. Otherwise, I'm going to try and talk about some other stuff that's going on. It's been nonstop Canada, really, for me for the last few weeks. So, with that said, I will see you folks back here tomorrow.